Hello, this is Aline from MasterYourWeb. You're watching HTML tutorial for absolute beginners, and in this video we will dive into divs and spans. So let's begin. The first thing that we might question ourselves is basically what is a div? Well, a div is nothing but a section of our application, that's all. Every web page is constructed using these sections called divs. And in order to simply demonstrate it, let's actually take a look at the Google's website. Now we can see that the Google's website has a few sections. For instance, we have the top section, which has the Gmail, the images and other applications, which is basically a div. This whole part is a div. Then we have another div which has the Google logo over here into the center. Another div is basically the search bar. Then we have the div which contains the other applications. And last but not least, we have the div over here into the footer, which lets us customize the Google's background. So that's basically it. Let's take a look at another example. And for that I will open Facebook. And let's actually take a look at the divs that the Facebook page has. For that we can see that the Facebook has this div over here, which has gray background, and inside of it has two other divs. We have this one on the left side, which is another div, and we have this div over here on the right side. Another div that we are having is the one over here into the footer, where we have the options to switch between languages and different other options over here. And that's basically it. So now that we saw what actually is a div, the next logical question is basically why should we use divs? Well, the main argument is that the divs help us structure the whole website. This comes with the fact that we have the possibility to style our divs using something called CSS. And for that we will look at the Facebook example, because as I mentioned, this big div has the gray background, and that is being done in the CSS, and the bottom div have basically the white background, which also is being done in the CSS. Then we have the possibility to add dynamic behavior to our website using JavaScript, and for that we will go into Google, and we will see that over here into the Google applications. Whenever we click on the Google Applications button, we basically toggle the appearance of another div, which basically contains all of the Google applications, and that is being done with JavaScript. Of course that for now we won't have to worry about CSS and JavaScript, we will tackle them later. So in my opinion, those arguments are really solid when it comes to why should we use divs. The next thing is building some divs. And for that, we will open the HTML tutorial. We'll open it with the Visual Studio Code, and I will right click on it, and I will go to Open With, and I will go to Visual Studio Code. Alright, so let's actually construct a div. So basically the formula for creating a div is starting with the smaller than sign, and then we write div, and then we put the greater than sign, and now we can see that in the Visual Studio Code the closing tag is automatically being added. So we can press enter, and we can write this is my first div. Great. Let's try to copy it and to create two other divs, and we will say that this is my second div, and this is my third div. Alright, let's actually minimize the Visual Studio Code and double click on it so that we open into the browser. Alright, great, so we have constructed three divs. Awesome! But now you might think that, okay, well, that actually doesn't really look like a website, right? Well, that's totally true, because we haven't added CSS to it yet. I will add some CSS to it. You don't have to add anything to the code. I just want to show a better use case for the divs.
One eternity later.
Great, so I have added some really tiny CSS to the program, and now it starts to look like a real website. More or less, of course. With a little bit of imagination, you can think of this part as basically the header bar of any website, which usually contains like a title and the menu. This could be more or less the content of a website, which could have like text or images or whatever. And this could be like the bottom section of any website, which contains like information about whoever built the website or whatever, right? So with just a little bit of imagination, this starts to seem like a real website. So as I mentioned, those changes were being added in the CSS, and the only thing that I've did is basically I've created this stuff, but actually we can delete it since it's not going to be relevant for us, right? We don't want to learn CSS right now. We'll have enough time to learn it, but for now I only wanted to basically showcase the power of divs. So I think that that was all related to the divs. Let's head on into our next section, which is going to be related to the spans. Alright, so basically spans are a section of the application as well, but they are being used for adding only a specific element to them. For instance, a text, an icon, an image, whatever. While doing that, as opposed to divs, the spans do not take the full width of the browser, they only take as much width as necessary, and it often has the exact width of the element which is inside it. That's the main difference between the two of those, because while divs are taking 100% of the screen width by default, spans are usually taking only as much width as necessary. So in order to demonstrate it, let's actually build some spans. We will click enter, and as you might have guessed, the structure for the span is pretty similar to the one for the divs, but instead of the div keyword, we will write the span, and we will say that this is my first span. Now we save it, and we will go into the browser. Alright, we can refresh the browser with an F5, and right now we will do something really awesome, which is going to be really useful for basically all of your life as a developer. We will right click on the first div, and we will click the last button over here, which says inspect. Okay, and this opens the development inspector tool. This tool is going to be really useful because it's going to enable you to develop a lot faster and also to troubleshoot certain issues. Okay, but for now, what we can see over here into the first tabs of the elements is basically the whole structure of the HTML, right? This is basically exactly what we have over here into the Visual Studio Code. So basically we can see that the HTML tag, also the head tag, then we can see we have like the body tag, and over here we have the divs and the spans. Alright, and what we can do is to actually look into the divs and the spans over here, because as we move our mouse towards them, we see that there's basically a difference, right? So basically this div, you can see that the blue line is stretching like the whole width of the browser, and that is a really nice feature of the divs, right? But when we go into the spans, it's completely different. We only have like as much width as the element has actually. So as I mentioned, that's basically the main difference between divs and spans. Great, now it's gonna be the time for our small exercise. So we have 3 steps for this exercise. So the first step is gonna be to stop the video. The second step is gonna be for you to start right clicking on every element and hit inspect to take a look at it. Next, our final step is gonna be to create a new div with the text, "This is my 4th div," and create also a new span with the text, "This is my 2nd span," save the changes and inspect those as well in the browser. You can start by doing this exercise and we will see each other in about 15 seconds. If you need more time, please feel free to pause this video to finish the exercise. So let's begin. Alright, so let's actually solve this together. We will head into Visual Studio Code and we will create our fourth div. So we will write div, closing tag, and inside of it we will write this is our fourth div. Save the changes. And next we need to create another span. And we will do it like this. And inside of it we will write this is our second span. We save the changes, go into the browser, and voila. Alright, right now what we will do is we're gonna click on every element and we'll actually take a look at it. Alright, it's just basically a way for us to familiarize with the development tools. So you don't have to spend like a lot of time in it, but it's gonna be really awesome if you could like take a couple of minutes or take, I don't know, 5 minutes to look at it, and that's basically it, right? So over here, as I mentioned, we have the whole structure for our application, right? This difference between the divs and the spans is really awesome because right now we have a smaller width, and then we have the whole width occupied by this div, and then again we have a small div. So that's really awesome. Great. So I hope that you now know what's a div and a span and what's the difference between those two. And of course that since they are really important to HTML, we will be adding more divs into the future and we will better understand them. It's gonna be a matter of practice. On the next video we will be covering headings and paragraphs, so we'll see you then. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the content and if you consider that it's at least 1% relevant, then please leave a like, a share, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll see you on the next one.